Understanding India and Pakistan, the Pahalgam terrorist attacks, and where we are going. Welcome to Law and Society. Please subscribe and let's get down to it. So, what happened was a couple of weeks ago, there were terrorists, believe four of them, who came into this part of Indian administered Kashmir in a town named Pahalgam, where there were tourists who were there taking in the views and nature and zip lining, and they went ahead and they asked the people there if they were Hindus or Muslims. If they said Muslim, they made them recite Quran verses. And if they said Hindu, they killed the men in front of their families. So after that terror attack, there was the retaliation where India cut off water supply to Pakistan. And then I believe maybe some hours ago, India attacked 9 terrorist camps in Pakistan with missiles. And there are now all kinds of reports talking about Indian jets being downed by Pakistani missiles, and number of people who have died on the other side. So this is a developing story and a very important global story, because this was something that President Obama said kept him up at night, was India and Pakistan, 2 nuclear states that, by the way, have been in conflict for decades, for about 76 years, and not for centuries like Donald Trump keeps talking about. We'll talk about that briefly later on, but why Donald Trump is wrong about that. At the very end, it's sort of a brief history lesson for Donald Trump and for anybody listening. And the second thing, I listen to all news sources, and if I see something that doesn't sort of compute with me, I have to say something. So as much as I watch and really agree with a whole lot of things that Midas Touch said, Midas Touch implied when they were talking about the first episode that I saw about India and Pakistan, that India is the aggressor in this incident. That they implied. They didn't come out and say it directly, but the focus was on the attacks on Pakistan, but not on what was the attack premised on. So, first things, don't ever forget where we found Osama bin Laden. After over a decade of war in Afghanistan, which Pakistan was supposedly helping us, Osama bin Laden was found in Pakistan. And when one of our prototype helicopters crashed, despite the mission being a success, Americans specifically told Pakistan to not let anybody access to the crash site. And Pakistan, right then and there, invited China in to inspect the helicopter crash site. Because these were prototype American helicopters, attack helicopters, stealth helicopters, America did not want Pakistan to divulge its secrets. But they violated their ally promise and let China in. So they are closer to China. Proximity is closer, and they are influenced more by China all the way back to 2011. We're talking about Osama bin Laden here. So Pakistan maintains still a veneer of democracy, but it is a military state. The military runs Pakistan. This is knowledge. This is part of diplomacy knowledge. Yeah, you know that. And America chose Pakistan as an ally because of its strategic positioning into Afghanistan without really realizing that Pakistan was equally as complicit in harboring terrorists, because again, Osama bin Laden was found in Pakistan and not in Afghanistan or in India or in any of the other Arab states, not even in Saudi Arabia, but in Pakistan. So with that in mind, remember that it is a military state. If you look at the rhetoric that came out of Pakistan after this Pahalgam attacks, it wasn't neighborly. They started blaming India for their domestic terrorism problems. They didn't say, "We're so sorry this has happened. We provide you full access to find these terrorists and we'll help you as much as we can because we ourselves are overwhelmed with militancy in Balochistan and in other places." Instead, they blamed India for being instigators of those terror attacks, when those terror attacks, there's no factual linkage to it that Pakistan has been able to show the civilized world. But instead, they started fighting along the line of control. And the rhetoric got even more bellicose as India suspended the Indus Water Treaty. And I'm not sure that was a good move. I'm not sure if today's attacks on Pakistan was a good move. But I know for sure that attacking civilians, picking out Hindu males, and murdering them in cold blood in front of their families, specifically based on religion, is wrong. We know that. We know what happened on October 7th in Israel to be wrong. Notwithstanding the response and the ongoing continued chaos there. But the act of terrorism, the impetus, the catalyst that is causing this chaos was wrong. Just breaking AP News said the Indian missile strike in Bahawalpur Mosque killed 13, including women and children. This fact, if it were to be proven to be a fact, is also not right. It's also wrong. But we know from decades of terrorist violence all over the world that terrorists often surround themselves with their families, women, and children more as human shields and less as family members. Osama bin Laden was surrounded by his family members in that home complex where he was surgically removed from. And institutions that shelter terrorists often also have services that are available to innocent civilians who frequent those services. Like mosques often happen to have militant activity happen in this part of the world. And that is the ugly nature of religious extremism that we have seen. It is not new. So you look at Pakistan's posture, because India won't back down. But maybe it should find ways to de-escalate instead of escalate. But if Pakistan responds to the missile strikes with attack by their government on Indian soil, then there will be a war. Because India surgically hit 9 terror camps, it says. And Pakistan calls it an act of war. So will there be a war? That's where we are right now. Where will the war be? Will it be localized to the Kashmir region, or will it be all over the country? Will it be all over Pakistan and all over the northwest of India, or will it also be part of the whole country if Pakistan, by their alliance with China and by China's alliance with Bangladesh, somehow decide that Bangladesh wants to ally with Pakistan and China is already Pakistan's ally? Then you have to look at what would happen in this part of the world and the chaos that would consume the part of the world that I currently live in. I'm an American citizen living abroad. So then there's also the nuclear threat, that they're both armed. It's not that Pakistan is the military that is armed with nuclear weapons. They are both armed. Yes, there should be an assessment of how Indian forces allowed this to happen. Was there no intel? There was no military personnel there, but nothing rationalizes or justifies what the terrorists did. And then they fled to Pakistan. 2 of them were Indians. They were apprehended. Nationality here matters little when you look at the reality of what happened. It is religious extremism and terrorism. But the posture that Pakistan took right after was not one of conciliation and working together. It was of aggression and shifting blame. So that is typical of somebody who wants to not deny what happened. They probably said we didn't have anything to do with it, but then went on to rhetoric that would have facilitated India in finding those other 2 terrorists that fled to Pakistan. A report from the Bulwark says, India does not appear to enjoy Israel's military superiority, either in terms of intelligence about its enemies or its defenses against counterstrikes. And Pakistan has nukes. American leadership is needed. It would be nice to have it. First of all, India also has nukes. They both have about 150 each. I think that's grown now to more over, I don't know what it has, but they have about the equal amount of nukes. I think India has a few more. So, India is, there are a few factual things that are off about that statement that the Bulwark made. The reality of the matter is Donald Trump in America is not going to do anything. They're not going to do anything about India and Pakistan. Donald Trump has no vested interest in any sort of involvement other than moral support and maybe intelligence. Right now, American intel is compromised, but maybe Tulsi Gabbard will be partial to India, as it is an open fact that China helps Pakistan with intel. So the country also, Israel is fighting militant groups in a loosely held Palestinian identity. Palestine isn't a military nuclear state. Pakistan is. But even still, India is much bigger than Pakistan, with more resources than Pakistan in the military, and it literally controls 80% of the water of Pakistan because it comes from rivers that flow down through India first. Therefore, the Indus Water Treaty that was needed, that caused bellicose rhetoric when that water was stopped. So India doesn't, so the disparity here made by Bulwark is not accurate in the sense of the parity between the two situations here. There's no comparison between, there's no question of Israeli superiority, military superiority over the militants of Hezbollah and Hamas. But that's a very different calculus than the military superiority that India would have over Pakistan, or Pakistan may have over India. It is far more likely that India has more military superiority over Pakistan simply by the weight of how big it is. 1.4 billion people, a military to match its size, a nuclear arsenal, aircraft carrier, and 80% control of the state, your enemy state's water resources. This is what kept Obama up at night, because the destructive potential and the genuine projected animosity the two countries have against each other is sort of confounding, because, and this is why Donald Trump is wrong about this fight going on for centuries, India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh did not exist until the independence of India from the British. I believe that was 1947. Maybe, yeah. Well, the British are the ones who arbitrarily drew the border lines where they made the Muslim majority areas Pakistan on either side of India. So Bangladesh was East Pakistan, and then there was West Pakistan being what is Pakistan today. In the 1970s, there was a war. My father is a refugee from that war. My whole family is a refugee from that war, where Hindus were displaced from Bangladesh during the breakage of Bangladesh from Pakistan. There was sectarian violence even then, even when Bangladesh was removing itself from Pakistan and becoming an independent country in the 70s. So British drew these boundaries to partition Pakistan and Bangladesh because it was convenient politically for the Western world. Because these three countries combined would have been a formidable counterbalance along with China to Western powers. And they had the power in their hands to undercut that possibility long before it could happen. And in doing so, they inflamed sectarian violence between the two countries that keep paying dividends to this day. And why I said earlier that there is this projected animosity is because the lines were drawn less than 80 years ago. The same as the lines that were drawn in what is now Israel and Gaza and Palestine. And the West and the United Kingdom, the British government essentially left those countries, these areas, in a state of flux as a political way to make sure that they didn't rise to the level of Western civilization. But even still today, despite that, India is the world's 5th largest economy, closing in on the 4th largest economy. And despite its vast population and developmental problems, it has surpassed the United Kingdom, the British Empire that ruled it, fiscally. So India is the behemoth in this story, but not the Goliath. The story here is not of David and Goliath. The parody of Israel just doesn't work. You have to look at this conflict entirely differently than you would the Israel Palestine conflict. Because though it is the same that these arbitrary lines were drawn by the British Empire, the fact of the animosity between Judaism and Islam and the fundamental lack, if you live in India, of the day-to-day animosity between Hindus and Muslims are very different. And politically, it has grown, and that is what the image has become of India. But let me tell you that this country prides itself in its secular democracy. So despite the fact that 80% of the country is Hindu and 11% of the country is Muslim, there isn't a war happening in India constantly. There isn't sectarian violence happening within India other than Kashmir constantly. It happened in Mumbai many years ago. That was India's 9/11. And this is very, very close to being, well, it is the most dangerous moment in this subcontinent in over 20 years. So I think the world should be very careful about how it frames what is happening in India and Pakistan. It is important to remember that India is not the aggressor. And the way that the diplomacy happened was that Pakistan didn't open up its borders to help India. Instead, blame shifted and tried to blame other terrorists, their own militancy problems, on India instead of Afghanistan, where a lot of the terrorism comes from. So it is a volatile situation, constantly developing, and the world should pay attention because a nuclear war in this part of the world would shake up the supply chains of, well, Apple, for example, because Apple now manufactures in India, and a lot of other high-skilled sector jobs that have been outsourced to India, like legal services and paralegal services. So with that said, keep your eyes on India and keep your eyes on Pakistan. Look at the rhetoric. Look at where they're talking about blood flowing, where they're talking about war as an act of war, and not helping in bringing terrorists to justice. Whereas India is retaliating against what it perceives and what its intelligence tells it were militants who were prepped and who were harbored in Pakistan. Maybe American intel will say something different, and we'll learn about that in the coming days. And maybe this escalation will be de-escalated. With that said, thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe, and I'll talk to you soon.